Hi everyone, good afternoon and welcome to the British Council's Science Cafe. Before we get going, I just want to say a few words to introduce our speaker. Science is an international endeavour. It requires that the best minds collaborate with each other across the world. The British Council here works together with the Embassy to promote scientific collaboration between the UK and Israel through a series of grants and projects which are funded and supported by our partners. Professor Yaakov Nahmias is one such researcher who has twice received a BIREX funding to pursue research with colleagues in the UK. Among other things, Professor Nahmias is the founding director of the Grass Centre for Bioengineering at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem and a fellow of the UK's Royal Society of Medicine. He is also the founder and chief scientific officer of Future Meat Technologies, whose groundbreaking work on the efficient production of cultured meat he will be talking about today. Now, before I hand you over to Professor Nahmias, I just want to encourage you to ask questions via the option in Teams. You should see a Q&A tab. You can ask them and vote on other people's questions at any time, but we'll answer them after the presentation itself, which should be around 15 to 20 minutes. So without further ado, I'd like to hand over to Professor Nahmias.
There we go. Thank you very much. We are doing this live event that I can't actually see how many people I'm talking to. So it's a new experience for me. And I hope it's a new experience for everybody here. We'll be able to take your questions. And I think I'm going to slide directly into my presentation. And then we'll take some questions and answers at the end. Okay. So I am the founder and chief scientific officer of Future Meat Technologies. We were one of the first investments of Tyson Foods in this sector. And I want to tell you a little bit about my thoughts and about cultured meat and why are we doing cultured meat and why is it important in this very precise time in history. So meat is a cornerstone of human evolution and culture. I know, we are in the middle of the summer, or at least coming into the summer. It certainly feels like that in Israel, and it's very warm around us. But for the majority of human evolution, we lived during an ice age. And during an ice age, there was very little to eat. There was very little fruit and vegetables to eat around us. So when somebody finally managed to kill a holy mammoth, then the entire tribe would celebrate. And this stayed with us for the last 2 million years. And today, you can find meat being celebrated around the world, right? Meat is the center dish in South America, North America, Europe, Africa, Asia, all around the world, maybe different types of meat. But it's still the center dish in the table. And the reasons for that are relatively easy to understand. Let me take you back to the Ice Age. So think about hunter-gatherers walking around and trying to pick up fruits and vegetables like other apes to eat. Well, they need to do a lot of work. For every 100 grams of fruits and vegetables that you pick, you can get about 100 calories. Very little fat, very little protein. So there's a limit of what you can do. But if you manage to kill a holy mammoth, then for 100 grams of steak, well, you get 200 calories. What's more important is that you get about 20 grams, 25 grams, 30 grams of protein. And this protein is very important for us because the protein makes the bodies that we live in. It makes more muscle. It allows us to grow more biomass. And for humans, biomass means, well, little humans, children, more people. So we can go, once we start hunting, it's the first time we can actually go from, a tribe of 10, 15 primitive ape-like creatures that are struggling to find food to larger tribes, 50, 100 individuals, simply because we have a source of protein. It's not only that, that protein comes with a lot of fat. 10, 20 grams of fat allows us to develop our central nervous system so we can grow bigger brains. And you take these two together and you can understand that in several hundreds of thousands of years later, you'll have an agricultural revolution because you have enough people to build a village. And then you can grow grains. And grains, without the danger of killing mammoths, gives you about 2 to 10 grams of protein and allowed us to develop the civilization as we know it today. And we can see this in the archaeological record. When we look at over 10 different types of non-human primates, and here in the x-axis you can see time in millions of years, and then on the y-axis you can see the size of our skull, essentially how big of a brain do we have. So as long as apes like us, ate a generalized diet, fruits and vegetables, we are not very different from other apes. When we started eating meat, and actually when we discovered fire that made all this protein available, suddenly we see this big jump. And it's a jump that develops over the last 2 million years. And then the last jump is here in the agricultural revolution, where a lot more protein and fat became available. This means that as nutritious as my vegetarian wife finds this, and it is a great dish, right? It's tofu and broccoli. It simply doesn't generate the same emotional response as this. You see, we can all take a step back, smell at this. Even though nothing is transferred to your computer. It produces this steak produces an emotional response. We can smell it. We can actually smell people grilling meat from 500 meters away. We can't smell cake from 500 meters away, even though it generates the same type of chemicals. We can smell grilled meat from hundreds of meters away because we're so sensitive to this. And most of us smile. If we are vegan and we detest meat, we might look at this and be disgusted. But we have to have an emotional response. We can't be apathetic to meat. We can be completely apathetic to tofu. We can take it or leave it. But meat gives us a very strong emotional response. And this is why the food industry has been doing a lot to try to mask or emulate the same plant-based material with something that looks like meat. We're trying to generate the same neuronal response to get the same feeling you get from traditional meat by playing dress up. So this is great. What is the problem? Well, the problem is that it costs way too much to produce meat. On average, it takes about 15 times more water to make beef than tofu. It takes 10 times more land and produces about 8 times more carbon equivalents. So the answer should be simple, right? Why not all of us turn vegetarian? And we are, right? There's an ever-growing community of vegetarians in the Western world. The problem is that for every, 10,000 vegetarians we have in Israel or Europe, we have about 10 million people doing exactly the opposite in China and India. The West is no longer the main meat consumer on this planet. China actually surpassed the United States back in the 1990s in the amount of meat consumed, millions of tons. And it's just growing linearly. And the biggest problem we have right now is that you can see the demand keeps on growing, but the supply can't keep up. The entire planet is already used to produce meat. This is one of the biggest reasons we have massive deforestation in the Amazon. We simply cannot increase meat production anymore, even though, our demand is growing. People want to eat more protein in their diet. So this is why there is a tremendous interest in plant-based meats. And companies like Impossible Foods and Beyond Meat have actually saw these trends and are trying to take plant protein and make them feel like meat. And indeed, they look like meat, right? And the mouthfeel is correct, and you can get the same mouthfeel and the same protein content as traditional meat, but with one major problem. It doesn't smell like meat. It doesn't taste like meat. You know, I can eat an Impossible Burger and like it, but my kids, you know, and I have 4 little kids, simply are not going to touch it. You know, they're not willing to touch it. It doesn't smell to them like meat. Why is that? Well, the reason is the fat. So if you look at the steak, right, you know, the red stuff that you see is the muscle, and that's the protein content and the texture. But the white material that you see in the steak, and you can see it in chicken as well, but it's more easier to see. It's easier to see in the steak. That's the fat tissue, and the grilling of the fat tissue actually releases hundreds of very complex molecules we call polyaromatic hydrocarbons. And these are the molecules we can sense even in parts per million from hundreds of meters away. They're very complex, they're very difficult to make synthetically, but they're released every time you know, we grill meat. And these are the molecules we crave. This is the flavor, and this is the aroma that is very distinct to meat. And there is one technology that can do that. One technology that can actually make meat that smells like meat, and that's cultured meat. And the basic concept was proposed over 100 years ago by Alexis Carl and others. And the idea is that you can source cells from an animal, get them to grow forever, grow them in bioreactors, and then put them together and assemble something that looks like meat. And I assume that if you're here, you're here because, well, you heard about it. And you heard about it because more than 7 years ago, Professor Mark Post made the first cultured burger by growing beef cells in the lab and, you know, making one burger. The problem is that that burger cost about $2 million per kilogram. It was incredibly expensive burger. And today there are companies that can do that, you know, for $40,000 per kilogram, $2,000 per kilogram. The price keeps on dropping, but it's still very expensive. So when we came to try to solve this problem, we understood that we need to do something very, very different from everybody else. We want to get to the point where our meat costs about $5 per kilogram. And it turns out you need to start with a completely different cell source. So right now, people are either taking, you know, muscle or fat cells from an animal or making stem cells. Stem cells are, you know, like a fertilized egg. They are the first cell that can make an entire animal. So they can make muscle and fat that you need. But growing these cells is very expensive. So what we chose is to go to a different type of cell called a fibroblast. A fibroblast is the cell of the connective tissue. So it's cells that are growing very, very fast to begin with. These are the cells that every time you get cut, close this cut in hours, right? And this is why they're very, very different from muscle cells, right? If you want to grow our muscles, we need to go to the gym for a month and then we grow a muscle by 2%, right? But if we cut ourselves, you know, that cut closes very fast. So there are huge advantages to grow to fibroblasts. One, they grow fast, right? So we call it the doubling time. How much time does it take to double in mass? If normal cells are about 40 hours, every 2 days they double in mass. Fibroblasts do that in 20 hours. So a day, every day they double. The other thing is the cost to grow them. You know, if you want to grow fat cells or stem cells, you have to have a lot of different growth factors and hormones in your medium, in your food, and that makes everything very, very expensive. Fibroblasts, on the other hand, you know, grow on nothing. You know, they need to grow, you know, when we get cut during inflammation. So they don't need a lot of growth factors or hormones, right? So the initial starting cost of the culture medium of the food is a lot lower. The last thing is that we can select cells, fibroblasts, that can grow as single cell suspensions. That means they can just float around in a stainless steel bioreactor like yeast, like you make beer, and grow to massive cell densities. So while normally, if you grow cells in bioreactor, you can get 2%, 10% yield. With fibroblasts, you can get 50 to 80% yield. So if you grow cells in 100 liters, you will get 80 kilograms. A lot more effective than anything else. The second technology that we developed was based on another understanding. Now, once you have cells and you start growing them, you need to feed them. And today, if I grow cells in my lab, for every kilogram I grow, I need about 200 liters. That's a lot of medium, a lot of food. So at bare minimum, I need about $4,000 to make a kilogram. If I go to bioreactors, even big ones that are made by Roche or Merck or Lonza, then the best I can hope for is to make a kilogram for about 10 liters of medium. So that's about $200 per kilogram. And the reason that we are limited is because the cells are, while they're growing, they're releasing all these waste products like ammonia and lactate. So they're growing in their own urine. And that's why we have to replace the medium. We replace the environment, this red fluid that you see. Well, if I grow a cow, it doesn't work like that, right? A cow doesn't have so much fluid, moving around. And the reason it doesn't is because it has a liver. So to grow 1 kilogram of mass in a cow, I only need, I don't need 10 liters. I need half a cup of water. That's it, 100 milliliters. That's why it's relatively cheap to grow animals. They still produce a lot of waste products, but these animals have a liver that can remove them from the animal and allow them to essentially use the same amount of plasma, the same amount of blood. So the second technology we developed is a rejuvenating bioreactor. Essentially, you can think about it as an artificial liver. Our cells grow, make waste products, but we constantly remove these waste products, allowing them to grow more efficiently. So our technology is a lot more efficient than anything else in the market. And if you want to see how this looks like, let me show you what the final products are, right? So immortal cells look like this. These are our spontaneously immortalized fibroblasts. They grow forever. They can feed the entire world. They've been growing for years in our labs. And we have them for chicken and beef and lamb. And we can take them and grow them very efficiently and even turn them into fat. So this is the world's first cultured fat. And we made it, over 2 years ago. And you can see in green all the fatty acids, the lipids that accumulate in these cells when we turn the mass, the biomass, into fat. Now, once you have that, you can take that and you can combine it with plant protein or with cell protein and essentially make something that looks like this. So this is the first cultured chicken. And I'm not sure that you can smell it. You can see it, you can hear it, but you can definitely not smell it. So it smells exactly like chicken. And it certainly looks like chicken too. So, and when you do this, when you grill this fat and protein, you actually get the same flavor and fragrance. If you want to take a closer look, this is how it looks like. So on the left, this is on the top. So this is farm-grown chicken over here. And on the bottom, this is cultured chicken, right? And here, you can actually see a cross-section. I'm an engineer, so we like cross-section. So this is, you can see the fibers in an animal grown and farm-grown chicken. And this is our cultured chicken, and it's very difficult to tell apart, very difficult. And we're not only doing chicken, we're also doing kebabs. So these are lamb kebabs. You can see the beautiful browning. And I would love to tell you this is my mother's ancient recipe, but it's not. It's actually with a chef, Yair Feinberg, that we're working with, that made these beautiful kebabs. And this is the cross section of the kebabs right here. And these are our burgers. So these are how the products look like. So why are we doing this? We're doing this because it's a lot more efficient than anything else that you can imagine. If we take a 600-liter bioreactor, that's about the size of your refrigerator at home. Right now, it's about 600 liters in size. We need a facility that is about as big as your kitchen. You can use that, refrigerator to make about 500 kilograms of fat every 2 weeks. That's about a ton a month. The process is fast, so it takes 2 weeks. It means that you can actually make the equivalent of about 4 tons of a hybrid when you add plant protein and animal fat. That means in your refrigerator back home, you can make the equivalent of about 3,000 chickens every 6 weeks, or about 100 steers every 10 months. So think about it. The equipment is that small, and it's a lot more efficient. You need about 95% less electricity. You need about 80% less water, and certainly 99% less space. So the future farm, we believe, is going to look like this. This is where you can essentially, this is about 1,200 liter facility, and this is where you can grow chicken or beef or pork or lamb. And the nice thing is that it will enable you to switch productions very, very rapidly. So, Christmas comes up and you want to make pork for Christmas, or, you make pork for Christmas. Memorial Day comes up in the United States, you want to make hamburgers, then you make hamburgers. Israel Independence Day comes up, then you make chicken. And if you really want to make haggis, I'm pretty certain you can make haggis too. If this technology is adopted, it also means some dramatic changes to the planet. This is a map that is taken from an amazing Bloomberg analysis that was published in 2018. And you can see how we currently use the land. This is the United States, but it's the same holds for Europe or Asia or South America. We live in a very small portion of the land. This is the pink area over here. This is how much is left in forests, at least in North America. All this yellow thing, about 30 to 40%, that's pasture. This is not where you live. This is where the cows you eat live. Okay? This is how much land we need to grow cattle and pigs. And then this is our cropland. This is where all our fruits and vegetables come from. And about 30% of that is to feed animals, right? So if we move to cultured meat, we can actually use 90% less land that we use for pasture. That means, all this yellow thing can disappear. We can actually, cut it and leave, only a small segment. This would allow us to almost double the amount of forests in the United States or Northern Europe. It would actively remove 59 billion tons of CO2 from the atmosphere if we just do that. Just let the land grow, and the forest would recover. It means that countries like the United States or even the entire Europe could become carbon neutral for a decade. And that might be exactly what we need to survive until 2030. So thank you very much, and I really appreciate the time, and I'll be happy to take your questions.
Thank you very, very much. That was a really interesting introduction. We have quite a few questions that have come in, and people have been voting away, so I have a great selection of questions to relay to you. I think the most popular question we've had says, so what are the effects of protein manipulation, actually growing the meat on the human body? Is the process safe, or is this different in some way to cells from an animal? There's a slightly more philosophical question as well. I'll just ask a few so we don't go back and forth.
So let's start with safety.
Yeah, sure.
I think that's a very interesting question. So we already had several dinners, and no horns grew on any one of us. It was actually delicious. Based on every single thing that we analyze right now in our lines are completely safe. So the process that we are using, it does not introduce genetic modification into the cells. So we do not put foreign genetic material in or take genetic material out. The process is spontaneous immortalization. We simply let the cells grow, and then they undergo some chromosomal rearrangements and start proliferating. The nice thing about that process is that it's very, very, very different from cancer, right? So that's like the first thing that people might think about when they hear the words immortal. But cancer is a disease. Cancer is a disease of an organism. The cells are under pressure, and they have to evade it inside the body. They have to evade the immune system. They have to bring in blood vessels. They have to send metastasis. So there are specific mutations that happen, and they don't happen overnight. They don't happen in months. They happen over decades. That's why cancer is usually an old age disease. And these mutations drive the disease we call cancer, okay? And it only happens in the organism. What we're doing is completely different. So we actually have cells that are growing in the dish and are spontaneously immortalizing, but there is none of these selective pressures exist. So it's a completely different environment. And when you take the entire transcriptome, so you do the entire genetic signature of these cells, and you use it to probe a massive database of every single type of human cancer that we know of and we, sequence, then you can see that there are absolutely no overlap. Very, very different. None of the human major driving mutations of cancer exist in our lines. And the protein is essentially the same as the protein that you eat from the animal.
Thank you. I think you've also answered one of the other questions here that was specifically about cancer. I have a slightly more philosophical question here, I guess. Do you think lab-grown meat is suitable for vegetarians?
It might be, but my wife is vegetarian, but I'm not sure this is for her. Okay. So people who are vegetarian and vegan are made a choice to avoid meat. Now, some of them might still miss meat and might eat this when it becomes available. But I'm not sure that they crave it. I think we have a much bigger population that craves meat and can't really, get enough of it. And it's about 93% of the population, and this is where we're aiming. In my mind, I'm aiming for my kids. So like I said, I have 4 little kids. And they eat, chicken schnitzel that their grandmother makes. And I want to make sure that at least when they grow up, they'll be able to feed their children exactly the same thing. My wife can eat her salad. It's fine. Now, that said, there are no animal components that go into the making of the meat, right? So cells are taken from an animal once, long time ago, and now they're growing forever with plant and yeast-based media. There is no animal products that go into the process. So vegetarians can conceptually eat it, and vegans can conceptually eat it. Whether they want to or not, that's another question.
And helpfully, again, you've taken me into another set of questions. I think these will have to be the last ones because we're running out of time. But there were questions again about what it is that you feed these cells. What are there? Questions about are there artificial additives? Are you adding hormones? How do you simulate the sort of real life a mix of nutrients and make sure that what comes out is nutritious as well? And is there a difference in the nutrition between the cultured meat and meat from a live animal? So what goes in and is what comes out of the same nutritional value?
It's very simple. So first of all, it's relatively similar. Although we're not growing keep in mind, we're not growing the entire animal. We're not growing a brain. We're not growing a liver. We're not growing a pancreas. We're not growing the animal microbiome, right? We're only growing the muscle and the fat. So the nutritional requirements are the nutritional requirements of muscle and fat. It's amino acids, it's vitamins, and it's minerals. There are hormones and growth factors that are there, but it's exactly the same hormones and growth factors that are in the animal. The nice thing about our process is you can actually wash them out at the end. So you're going to get exactly the same signature. There is a major advantage, though, to cultured meat over plant protein, and this is something that we need to understand. Human beings, like I said in the beginning, are made out of muscle. Well, me, slightly less than other people, but at least 40–60% muscle. That's our biomass. Muscle is actin and myosin. It's two specific proteins. So we need the amino acid profile that will help us make actin and myosin, essentially human muscle. When we eat muscle from a chicken or muscle from a cow, or cultured muscle from chicken or cow, we get actin and myosin. We get the exact same amino acid profile that is used to build muscle. So it's a 1-to-1 conversion. But when we eat soy protein or pea protein, well, we're getting the protein distribution that is made to make, well, globulins in pea. Or, so unless you're made from peas, then you're not going to get exactly the same amino acid profile. Okay, that means all the excess amino acids you're not using, well, those turn into glucose, sugar. So we have to keep that in mind when we are comparing plant-based protein to, animal or cultured protein. Do you want me to do a flash round over the questions that I see?
There are quite a lot, but I think we're over time, so we'll have to go. But there was one quite interesting, culturally relevant question: is it kosher or halal?
Yeah,
we know.
Yeah. Yes, we do. So the main issue with kosher is you can't take cells from a live animal because that's going to be ever in the chai, right? So we don't have a problem with that because it's we're taking cells from animals that already were slaughtered. So we're actually from the excess skin that people usually throw away. We can actually take cells from we took cells from that. So that's not a problem. The second question, which is a bigger one, is whether it's going to be parv or meat. And the important thing here is that we diluted the small animal material that came in more than 1 billion fold. So it's batel b'shishim. That means it should be parv. Now, whether that means that the bacon that you can make with this technology is going to be kosher and parv, that's a completely another question, and I'm not sure that this is the right time to answer it.
Great. Okay, well, I think that's all we have time for, but thank you very much for joining us. That was really, really interesting. As you can see, a lot of questions. So to those of you who joined us today, also, thank you very much. We will send you a short survey just to ask what you thought of this. This is a new series for us, so any advice on how it went, on what you'd like to hear about, what you'd like to see in future, please do use that. It's anonymous, so you can be brutally honest. But if you please join me in thanking today's speaker, and I hope you join us next time too. Take care.
Thank you.